Welcome to the NHRA Motorsports Museum in Pomona, California, a town whose name conjures up images of some of drag racing's most dramatic and enduring moments that have taken place on the legendary drag strip that lies, well, about a quarter mile from where I'm standing. This building and its exhibits are comprehensive testaments to the incredible history that has unfolded during the 50 years the National Hot Rod Association has been in existence. It's as close to a Smithsonian of straight-line speed that has ever been built anywhere in the world. Hi everyone, I'm Bill Stevens, and it's my pleasure to serve as your guide on this special program devoted to what we think are some of drag racing's greatest stories and landmark achievements. Obviously, compiling such a list invariably leads to differences of opinion and some spirited debate among drag racing's enormous legion of fans. But as the old saying goes, it's difference of opinion that makes a horse race or a drag race. So if you're ready, let's go back through 5 decades of speed and relive some of drag racing's greatest stories. It would be hard to imagine any discussion on personal achievement in drag racing not including the name Bob Glidden. His 10 championships in Pro Stock and his 85 national event wins during a brilliant career have remained the standards of excellence upon which all professional drag racers have measured their successes. His Pro Stock career began in 1972, but with a single runner-up all season at the NHRA Super Nationals. But in 1973 and 1974, he won the U.S. Nationals and soon established himself and his long string of factory Ford race cars as the sport's most unbeatable combination. In his spectacular career, he finished in the top 5 in Winston points 16 consecutive times, a record that remains unbroken. His astounding elapsed time and top speed milestones, which were set at virtually every racetrack on the NHRA Tour, is remarkable. And before his retirement as an active driver in 1997, his place in drag racing history had been securely guaranteed.
Well, I consider Bob a real legend to our sport. I think he set the pace by his extreme work ethic, that if we wanted to be competitive in this sport, we had to work the long, tedious hours like he has, and got us to the level of competition that we're at today.
Bob Glidden was one of the true innovators in Pro Stock. He was here winning races and winning championships before there were really professional teams. And one thing Bob really brought to Pro Stock and drag racing, NHRA drag racing in general, is the family atmosphere. He raced with his family, he raced with his wife. It's always been an inspiration to me.
I'll tell you what, he was the best there ever was. We all shot. We wanted to shoot him down. That was the guy we were always after, and there'll never be another Bob Glidden. He was the best there ever was.
Ironically, the season he may best be remembered for was 1979, the one year in which he campaigned a Plymouth Arrow. That year he won 7 national events, captured his 4th Winston title, and dispelled any notions that he could only make winning horsepower with engines supplied by Ford. During his championship years, Glidden was hounded by some of the greatest names in Pro Stock, such as 4-time Winston champion, the late Lee Shepard. A Glidden-Shepard Pro Stock final at any national event was nothing short of sheer drama, as each driver did his utmost to take the measure of the other. And when Warren Johnson began to emerge as another threat to Glidden's dominance, another unflinching rivalry between 2 of the sport's greatest stars was born. No other Pro Stock driver in history has compiled as staggering a career record as Bob Glidden. Despite his outstanding performance milestones, even Warren Johnson has won only half as many Winston titles as Glidden, and it's possible he may never win as many. Simply stated, Bob Glidden continues to stand alone as one of Pro Stock history's most feared and respected champions. As we all know, drag racing's roots were sunk deep on the post-World War II boulevards and avenues of Southern California by young hot rodders who tinkered with their jalopies and home builds with little more than their imaginations and pocket money. It was a motorsport that included every man, not a creation born from the privileged classes. Organized drag racing became a growth industry through the efforts of Wally Parks and, of course, the National Hot Rod Association. In its early development stages, the sport began taking on form and function, as drag strips themselves evolved from unused airstrips and salt lakes to purpose-built facilities primarily in Southern California. As the events themselves took on more of a structured look and feel, drag racing truly moved from a slapdash hobby to a full-fledged sport. By the middle and late 1950s, it had clearly arrived. One aspect of the sport that had remained virtually unchanged during those early years was the starting procedure. It consisted basically of an official starter who, once the cars had been positioned at the starting line, paused momentarily and then waved a green flag to start the race. It was a primitive system that was fraught with inconsistencies. False starts were common. Racers argued constantly about unfair head starts they perceived their opponents had enjoyed. And yet, it was the way drag races were started well into the 1960s. Until the advent of what we now call the Christmas tree, which arrived at the NHRA from the Krondek Electronics Company. It immediately changed the face of drag racing forever. The man who perhaps has the most intimate understanding of how the Christmas tree impacted drag racing is the man who epitomized the position of official starter for the NHRA for almost 50 years, Buster Couch.
Well, before the Winter Nationals, a week before in Fontana Dragway, at that time in California, which is no longer in existence, but it was a pretty big track. They had a bunch of fuel cars and everything there that week, practicing and testing a big money meet before the Winter Nationals next week. So Bernie Partridge and I, we both division directors at that time, Jack Hart Wallace sent us out there with a tree. Mickey Thompson was running the track at that time, and Don Rackman, I think, was his track manager. So we go out there and hook up the tree that morning, hook it all up. It working good. First two cars that leave the line, it didn't work right. Boy, the racers wanted to kill us. Get that junk out of here now. So we go back and work on it again. We get it to working perfect. Maybe we'll run one or two cars, then it wouldn't work again. Something would go wrong. They cussed us and the whole works. So we finally decided before we got killed, we'd just take it and go home. So we took it and went back home. And about 5 or 6 years later, I found out that Rackman was up in the tower pulling the plug every time he didn't want it to work because they didn't think the racers would like it.
Over the years, the Christmas tree itself went through a series of changes. In the beginning, all races ran from a full 5 amper half-second sequence to the green light. Later, the system was changed to a simpler 3 amper half-second sequence. And then ultimately, the professional categories were given the current system, in which all 3 ambers light simultaneously, with the green coming exactly 0.4 of a second later. The NHRA sportsman categories all run several variations of starting sequences, including a handicap system, which allows cars of differing classes to compete equally, and also to allow drivers to choose their own dial-ins. An entire aftermarket electronics industry has grown up around helping drivers take the fullest advantage of the Christmas tree system when launching their cars. And of course, the dreaded red light at the bottom of the tree has all but eliminated those bitter arguments that often erupted in those good old days. Every sport has its honor roll of pioneers, men and women who have helped to define the very sport in which they compete, and have made lasting influences that are still being felt within that sport today. This car, Swamp Rat 14, was built and raced by drag racing's most ingenious innovator, who not only won races and championships, but with this very car, helped to create the mechanical backbone of Top Fuel racing as we know it today. He's a man whose name has become synonymous with Top Fuel racing, and he, of course, is Big Daddy Don Garlits. Top Fuel racing was on the fast track in the 60s. Most of what was really happening in the class was coming into its own out west, where nitromethane was flowing like the tide waters of the Pacific. The NHRA had banned fuel for a number of years beginning in 1957. But once nitro was back at the track, the fuel wars were soon back up to speed. By then, Don Garlits had begun forging a presence in Top Fuel racing from his home base in Florida. His rivalries with West Coast racers are of legend, as are the many innovations that sprung from his race shop and appeared on his string of Swamp Rat fuelers. But the most reverberating brainstorm ever to be credited to Big Daddy is one that still provides the fundamental basis for every Top Fuel racer competing in the world today, the rear-engine dragster.
When I look at drag racing as a whole, I think Don Garlits for sure was the most innovative and brightest guy that I've ever seen come down the pike.
Garlits, he has brought along the way a lot of innovations that are used today and then gone to the next step, of course.
On March 8, 1970, Big Daddy was competing at the Old Lions drag strip in Long Beach, California, when his 2-speed transmission exploded, breaking his left leg, severing his right foot at the arch, and nearly killing him. As he lay in Pacific Coast Hospital, recuperating, he vowed he would create a Top Fuel car that would no longer subject drivers to the risk of injury and death that had tragically befallen a host of drivers. Although rear-engine dragsters had been built in the past, it was Garlits who proved they could not only be competitive, but also win races.
I'll never forget being down at Lions drag strip. We're down there with our front engine cars, and we heard he had a rear engine car, and he come pulling in there, and we weren't going to laugh at him, but we were close to it because nobody was successful with the rear engine car. And lo and behold, he just blew us all away, and without a rear wing on the car too, which was unbelievable.
With help from then crew member and former driver Connie Swingle, Garlits built his first rear-engine dragster and went on to win the 1971 AHRA Top Fuel Championship. Plus, he won the NHRA Winter Nationals, Spring Nationals, and had set new ET records in both sanctioning bodies. The danger that had hovered over Top Fuel racing since its inception, with drivers sitting inches behind their nitro-burning engines, became a thing of the past. And Big Daddy Don Garlits, along with his other legendary exploits, set the stage for the 4-second, 330-mile-per-hour Top Fuel performances of today. Wrong or right, drag racing was a sport that was a guy thing for the 25 years or so that followed its formative years in that ever-changing Southern California gene pool. While women had competed as drivers here and there during that time, it wasn't until 1966, when Shirley Shahan won stock eliminator at the NHRA Winter Nationals, that the idea of women racing toe-to-toe with men seemed reasonable. But it was another Shirley who caught everyone's attention in drag racing spotlight in 1977 that proved that the right woman with the right talent and the right team could race their way into a Winston Championship. Shirley Muldowney. She and husband Jack began their drag racing career like many other racers back in the 1960s in upstate New York, with a series of low-budget door slammers and dragsters. By the mid-1970s, she was building a solid reputation in both NHRA and AHRA Top Fuel racing. After the breakup of her marriage, Shirley continued to race and developed a professional and personal relationship with veteran fuel racer Connie Coletta. Never one to back down or feel intimidated, Shirley Muldowney slowly earned the respect of her male Top Fuel adversaries, and in 1975 made it to the finals of the U.S. Nationals, only to lose to the driver who signed off on her first Top Fuel license, Don Garlits. But in 1977, Shirley took her brash, no-fear attitude and icy determination to the NHRA Winston Top Fuel Championship, the first woman ever to win a professional title in any motorsport. In 1980, she proved her first championship was no fluke, as she won the Winston title again, the first driver, man or woman, to win a second Winston Top Fuel crown.
It takes more than just a driver to pull that out. It takes a team. And, you know, when there's somebody over in that lane that you really want to dust off, that really has got it coming, you know, you just hope and pray that your guys did their job right, because they're the ones that pull it out for you.
By now, Shirley was a genuine racing superstar whose snarky one-liners and pugnacious disposition made her a fan favorite. She delighted in her celebrity, and her tuner, Ron Tobler, was destined to become her second husband. Her third Top Fuel title in 1982 set another drag racing milestone, and her future looked to be even brighter. But in June of 1984, while qualifying for the NHRA La Grande Nationals at Senaire Drag Strip in Montreal, Shirley was severely injured in a crash at close to 250 miles per hour and would need 2 years to recuperate. Before returning to drag racing in 1986 with limited sponsorship, Shirley and Ron were unable to recapture their championship performance, with which they had turned the sport upside down only a few years earlier. And today, she competes on a scaled-down schedule at IHRA national events and various match races.
I will never retire. I won't go through the retirement program that they're all going through. I don't want any part of that. When I'm gone, I will quit. I will not retire.
But make no mistake, Shirley Muldowney opened the door for other women who would follow, allowing them to compete heads-up with men in the brutally powerful sport of Top Fuel racing, such as national event winners Lori Johns, Lucille Lee, Shelley Anderson, and Kristen Powell. Few drag racers of any gender in any category can boast 3 Winston titles. And yet, Shirley Muldowney not only won them, but made an unfading mark on the sport she loves that will long endure. As the story goes, when physicists were asked back in the 1940s what the highest speed a wheel-driven automobile could attain in a standing start quarter-mile run, the consensus was about 150 miles per hour. Of course, someone forgot to tell drag racers that. Almost from the moment that drag racing was launched, the speeds have skyrocketed from year to year, certainly no more so than in Top Fuel. By the mid-1950s, the 150-mile-per-hour barrier had already been smashed to pieces. In 1964, 200-mile-per-hour Top Fuel top speeds became a regularity. But in the minds of the great majority of Top Fuel racers, 300 miles per hour in the quarter mile represented the most glorious of achievements waiting to be claimed. As the 1992 season began, nothing had happened at the first two races that indicated that the 300-mile-per-hour barrier was in any imminent jeopardy. Kenny Bernstein won the year's first race, the Winter Nationals, beating Jim Head with a 496 at 281 miles per hour. The next race in Phoenix was won by Pat Austin over Doug Herbert with a 506 at 286 miles per hour. But the next race was at the super quick Gainesville Raceway, and the upcoming 1992 Gator Nationals was beginning to take on some added significance.
When everybody was running 295 miles an hour, 298, I think there were quite a few of the better teams that were really trying to be the first to go 300. And the crew chiefs were working feverishly to be that team, and it was like maybe one of the last great benchmarks on the wall.
On Saturday, March 20th, 1992, Kenny Bernstein and the Bud King Top Fuel dragster were about to make what was thought to be a run at the #1 qualifying position for Sunday eliminations. As the Bud King prepared to leap from the starting line, drag racing history was about to be made. Something that Kenny Bernstein was no stranger to, having become only the second man in NHRA history to win 4 consecutive Winston Funny Car titles between 1985 and 1988. This time, the scoreboards recorded one of the all-time great performances in drag racing, and Bernstein achieved a mark that had been coveted by everyone who had ever competed in a Top Fuel dragster, the sport's first 300-mile-per-hour speed.
What a deal. I'm speechless. I mean, unbelievable. Dale, West, the Budweiser King team, you can't say enough about them. They just keep coming at it. 300 miles an hour, I can't believe it.
301.
It's a dream come true, believe me. I can't say enough about NHRA and the preparation of the racetrack. It took perfect conditions to do it, believe me. I can't believe this.
Bernstein would go on to record another drag racing first in 1996, when he won the Winston Top Fuel title, becoming the first racer to win championships in both nitro categories. In 1999, he celebrated another drag racing milestone, his 20th anniversary with his primary sponsor, Anheuser-Busch. But in a career that has been underscored with tumultuous victories and thrilling successes, Kenny Bernstein's 301.70 mile-per-hour pass in Gainesville, Florida in the spring of 1992 remains his most resounding accomplishment. This is one of the most fabled race cars in all of drag racing history, the Chi-Town Hustler. Campaigned by John Farconis, Austin Coyle, and Pat Minnick, back in 1982 and 1983, Frank Hawley drove this to the Winston title. In fact, it was also the first winner of the Big Bud Shootout. Back then, this car would run 580s at almost 250 miles an hour. Back then, if those guys had been told that within 10 years, funny cars would be going 4 seconds at 300 miles an hour, it would have seemed like something out of Fantasyland. And yet, in an amazing twist of fate, at the same race, on the same weekend, in 1993, we saw the sport's first funny car 4-second pass and 300-mile-an-hour run. And those are our next two stories. Heartland Park in Topeka, Kansas became an epicenter of drag racing history on the final weekend of September 1993. The Sears Craftsman Nationals was taking the 1993 NHRA Winston Championship Tour down the home stretch. And in funny car, John Force had already clinched his third Winston title in Maple Grove, earlier than any other pro champion had locked up their crown that year. There really wasn't a whole lot of talk in the funny car pits except that maybe, just maybe, someone would make a sub 5-second pass.
Well, a lot of people wanted it. I'm sure I was one of them. Obviously John Force and Chuck Etchells, and only one person can get it, and it wasn't John Force and it wasn't me.
We were all going for it, and it really, we were all real close. There was guys that run 5 flat. We'd run 5:01.0, and we felt like we could do it. But amongst trying to qualify and win races, we were trying to run the 4-second range.
And then, during qualifying, Chuck Etchells and tuner Tim Richards, who after teaming up went on to finish second in the Winston Points Chase in 1993, delivered the shock. With $25,000 on the line for the sport's first 4-second funny car pass, $12,500 from Castro, and a $12,500 bonus which Force had put up earlier that day, Etchels cashed in with his historic .498 pass.
Oh, that was just a situation where one of the sponsors had dropped out of putting up the $25,000 for the first funny car to run in the fours, and Castro was talking about it, of doing it, and we were so sure we were going to do it that I told John Howe from Castro I'd split the money with him.
You go back 7, 8 years ago, especially in our condition, 25 grand was a pile of money. And they didn't announce it until we were all sitting in the staging lanes, and of course that's when they kind of bamboozled us. You know, Force knew what was coming down. He was all set up to do it. He knew his car had it, and we didn't have a clue. And they brought us all to the starting line, you know, Bazemore, Hoffman, you know, everybody, Cruz. So we're all standing up there, and they made the announcement. And so I go screaming back into the staging lanes. Thank God we were near the end of the line. And I said to Tim and Kim, I says, you know, we got enough beans in this thing to run 4 seconds? He looked at me and said, what, are you crazy? So I'm thinking, oh, man, like, oh, shucks, you know. So we all go up there. Force is right near the front of the line. So he's going to get that 25 grand before anybody can get it.
My car was running hose, and I was the second pair in line, so I knew that I was the one that could do it before a couple others that had a shot at it.
And lo and behold, I don't think the car before then or since then has ever had to shut off on a qualifying run.
Shoot your mouth off. Sometimes things don't go right, and I did the burnout, and it broke a brake caliper backing up, and I had to shut off. I was not able to make the run.
Now Force is a nervous wreck, and I can see him. He's pacing around up there, and so our turn comes, and we're sitting there, and I see, he knows Cruz didn't do it, this car didn't do it. He's looking at us as probably the last person that can do it. And they start the motor up, and they put the body down. He's standing right off to the side. I roll by him, I waved it going into the burnout, you know. And I'm just laughing, having fun with it, not thinking it can happen. Well, let me tell you, that thing got to half track, and I knew it was on one. And I'll never forget it. It never stopped pulling. It was by far the best run I was ever on. And couldn't be sure, you know, you'd never done it before, so you don't know what it is.
Probably a dumb move on my part because race cars have a mind of their own, and when you start predicting, that's how you fail, and I don't do that anymore.
As remarkable as Chuck Etchell's 4-second run was, there would be another lightning bolt of funny car energy unleashed at Topeka that same weekend. And again, it was a subject that had been casually debated amongst funny car racers and fans alike as the tour headed into its final few races. Would we see a 300-mile-per-hour funny car run in 1993? One racer, who had almost accidentally stumbled onto a tune-up that was serving up 299-mile-per-hour top speeds, thought he may have a shot at that milestone. Jim Epler. Epler's Rug Dr. Oldsmobile was being tuned by young up-and-comer Mike Klober, and his expertise had given Epler the tools to run speeds over 20 miles per hour faster than his previous year's career best, 274 miles per hour. On Sunday, in the first round, Epler, who had only qualified 11th, faced number 6 qualifier Gordon Mineo. The race was close, with Epler edging Mineo's 5:19 with his 5:16. But the roar of the crowd that rocked the heartland wasn't to celebrate Epler's win, but the top speed reading that flashed onto the scoreboards, 300.40 miles per hour.
The car's been running so good the last half of the race. We went 299.90 in qualifying, and I thought, man, I mean, we could really make some history here. So we waited until Sunday morning. I mean, same conditions, beautiful air, and car went out there, made the same kind of move, and went 300.40. I mean, it was a huge deal. I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. I mean, the last major barrier in fuel racing, but to be the first over 300 in a funny car, that was such a big deal, you know, in my career, and a day I'll never forget.
Etchell's 498 on Friday and Epler's 300-mile-per-hour blast on Sunday closed the circle on two of the most sought-after goals in funny car history. Many believe them to be the last great barriers that we'll see broken in nitro racing in our lifetime. The fact that they were shattered on the same weekend adds an element of mystique and irony to a sport that never seems to have a shortage of either. Kurt Johnson's career path was never really in doubt. As the only son of one of the sport's most dominant pro stock drivers, Warren Johnson, Kurt's inaugural season as a pro stock driver in 1993 saw him finish second in points to his dad, the first time a father and son had finished 1 and 2 in a pro category. Kurt's 3 national event wins propelled him to the Winston Rookie of the Year award, and by the time the 1994 season rolled around, Kurt was nearly as feared and respected as his dad by his pro stock peers. Pro stock automobiles are the most condition-sensitive machines in professional drag racing. Air temperature, air pressure, humidity, adjusted altitude, and track temperature must all fit within a delicate window to provide these non-supercharged race cars with what they need to perform at record-setting numbers. So, as the Winston Tour headed for Old Bridge Township Raceway Park in May of 1994 for the Mopar Parts Nationals, there was tangible eagerness among the Pro Stock teams arriving in New Jersey that the sport's first 6-second Pro Stock pass may be in the offing. The Englishtown racing surface had plenty of bite, and the near sea-level location of the track had always helped tweak the power outputs of the 500 cubic inch Pro Stock engines. On the evening of May 20th, during Pro Stock qualifying, Kurt Johnson watched as other Pro Stock drivers ahead of him made their runs, many in the low 7-second range, and Kurt suspected he could do what nobody else had been able to do so far.
Well, actually at that time, we weren't paired up to go at a certain time in the qualifying order. We just came up as we pleased, and I waited till the very last minute. I think Jim Yates was behind me in line, so I was the second to last car in line. Everybody ran ahead of me, and the air got better. The atmospheric conditions got real good, and it got cooler that night, and we just had a perfect racetrack, perfect conditions to run under.
The crowd sensed the possibility of witnessing something very special. Most had assumed that the first 6-second pass would come from Kurt's dad, W.J., who was in an intense struggle with Darrell Alderman for the Winston title that year, and who had consistently scored top speed of the weekend at event after event. But tonight, the spotlight belonged to the younger Johnson.
When I seen Evans come strolling through there and he was out of breath, I knew I must have did something good. And he said, yeah, you run a 6. And it was just like, oh my God, here we are, 25 grand later in a Gold Dominator carburetor.
Kurt's 6.98-second blast earned him the first slot in the Holly 6-second club for Pro Stocks, and a place in drag racing history that even his dad was unable to claim. But as in the familiar tradition of the Johnson family, it was all in a day's work. Kurt will long remember Englishtown '94. Although he didn't win the event, he parlayed his $25,000 bonus for his 6-second pass with another $50,000 for winning the then DuPont Pro Stock Challenge, plus a slick $50 payout for setting a new national record. Total take for the weekend, $91,000. But for Kurt Johnson, the satisfaction of scoring that first 6-second run in only his second year of Pro Stock provided the kind of pride and satisfaction that money can never buy. Of all the racers who have ever climbed into a Pro Stock automobile, none have had a more businesslike, nose-to-the-grindstone approach to drag racing as Warren Johnson. While Bob Glidden may hold the edge in overall championships won, Warren Johnson has amassed a staggering record of statistical achievements that include #1 qualifying slots, low ETs and top speeds of the weekend, and the ability to extract more horsepower from a Pro Stock engine than just about anyone else in the class. He had been the first Pro Stock driver to reach 160, 180, and 190 miles per hour. And everyone suspected that when the first 200-mile-per-hour Pro Stock pass arrived, Warren would be the guy to nail it. As the 1997 season was getting up to speed, so was Warren Johnson. He had won the season-opening Winter Nationals, but had failed to make another final round since heading into Richmond for the 4th annual Pennzoil Nationals. Records were the furthest thing on WJ's mind. He wanted to win, and in the big picture, wanted to take the Winston Championship, which Jim Yates had spirited away the previous year. Late Friday, Pro Stock teams prepared for the evening qualifying session to be televised live on ESPN2. The pits were abuzz with anticipation, as everyone's portable weather stations reflected conditions that were as good as they had been in a long time. Cool air, low humidity, solid barometric pressure. As Warren Johnson sat in the staging lanes, he knew a 200-mile-per-hour run was well within reason, and he wanted it. Warren was in the left lane, the side that had up until then been producing the superior numbers. The sellout crowd was on its feet as WJ bumped into the staging beams. It was a run that looked very much like another hyper-quick WJ lap. But when the top-end scoreboards flashed back a top speed of 200.13 miles per hour, Virginia Motorsports Park went berserk.
Our program has been geared, towards the performance end of this thing for basically 20 years. So it was a matter of time that we were going to ultimately achieve that. We were fortunate enough to be the first one, and after that, the floodgates opened and a bunch of cars came through the 200-mile-an-hour barrier.
The Johnson family dream had been realized. Kurt had been the first in the 6s, and Warren had been the first to 200. It was an emotional moment as the $25,000 bonus from Holly for that first 200 was presented to the professor. But after the passage of time, Warren and Kurt have both filed their individual achievements away and have gone back to what they do best: concentrate on the now. In the history of NHRA professional drag racing, there have been countless achievements by first-year drivers which quickly earned them almost overnight star power. The names Jeb Allen, Richie Stevens, Kristen Powell, and Matt Hines come quickly to mind. But in the 50 years of Top Fuel competition, no rookie driver had ever won the first 2 national events in which they competed. In 1997, a former sand drag racer and journeyman sportsman driver in the alcohol ranks not only pulled off a season-opening twofer, but went on to win 2 consecutive Top Fuel titles. His name is Gary Scelzi. His Top Fuel career began with Alan Johnson's Team Winston operation, due to the tragic circumstances that unfolded at the 1996 U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis. During Top Fuel qualifying, Alan's brother Blaine, a tremendously popular and talented Top Fuel star on the rise, was killed as he ran the weekend's quickest pass of 4:61. The choice to have Gary succeed Blaine was a surprise to some, but Scelzi came to the job with the right attitude. At the Chief Auto Parts Winter Nationals in February of 1997, Scelzi handled his duties with the skill and poise of a seasoned veteran. He qualified number 1 with a stunning 4:62, and then, in the first round, facing Spike Gore, Gary displayed his outstanding talent and finesse as the Team Winston car got its front wheels up on the line. Scelzi deftly pedaled the throttle, got the car settled, and streaked to the win light with a 482. In the final round, racing the only 5-time Top Fuel champion in history, Joe Amato, Scelzi was neither intimidated or flustered, as both cars broke the tires loose. But it was Scelzi who recovered and won his first national event in his first Top Fuel appearance, with some unremarkable numbers: 771 at 231.
I was so nervous about not being late or not making a rookie mistake. You know, here Alan Johnson asked me to drive his car. Thought, God, you don't want to blow it now. You made it all the way to the finals. You've done a fairly good job up to this point. Don't choke. Fortunately for me, I was on time, but the car smoked the tire. I actually stayed on the gas a little bit too long, got the car sideways, jumped right back on it, did a lot of things wrong several times, but fortunately for me, we were fortunate enough to get down to the end of the racetrack and win the race. And that was probably one of the most emotional, one of the biggest races that I'll never forget.
It would be the same story at the next race in Phoenix, the 13th annual ATSCO Nationals. But this time, the final round would be quite different. Scelzi had qualified number 6 and had gotten past Jim Head, Shelley Anderson, and Mike Dunn in the first 3 rounds. His final round opponent, the defending Winston champion Kenny Bernstein and the Bud King, had qualified number 4 and had taken out Doug Herbert, Scott Kalita, and Scott's dad Connie in his first 3 rounds. Once again, the rookie driver was facing one of the sport's most celebrated champions in the payoff round. And once again, Scelzi was equal to the task. In one of the closest Top Fuel finals of that or any year, Scelzi won his 2nd consecutive race. His 462 at 305, beating Bernstein's 463 at 315.
It was just incredible. The emotions were so great, and it was so numbing. It was like 3 months later that I realized that, God, you won the first 2 races and you're making it to the semifinals, and you know, this is a season you don't have, but we were having, and it was numbing.
Gary Scelzi would go on to win the Winston title, the first rookie ever to win an NHRA Top Fuel championship. He was easily chosen as the 1997 Winston Rookie of the Year and went on to win the championship again in 1998, another milestone.
I always wanted to be a Winston champion ever since I was a kid, ever since I started racing. I mean, I never just wanted to win races. I wanted to be a champion. I wanted to know if I had the heart to do it. I wanted to know if I got with the right people, if I could do it. When it came down to doing it, it was almost so exhausting that you wanted to just lay down on your knees and go to sleep and just wonder if it was a dream or not. I didn't go to sleep. It was probably a 2-week high, I mean, of parties and having a good time and people calling you. And it was such a great feeling with your expectations so high, being in a car that you're supposed to win in and winning. It was one of the greatest feelings of my life.
he is the singularly most successful drag racer of all time. He has become as close to an American institution as drag racing has produced, and his charisma, aura, and almost hysterical fan loyalty have made John Force a man who can be genuinely described as a living legend. As the 1990s came to a close, he had become the defining personality in a sport that had long placed most of its emphasis on the machines rather than the men. He won every Winston Funny Car title in the decade, save one, when Cruz Pedregon captured his first in 1992 as a rookie. But his climb from obscurity as a Bucksdown truck driver to the most popular and productive drag racer in history was not without its early trials and tribulations.
Well, I can remember the day just to get my truck and trailer across the country to Seattle, I had to haul National Dragsters, their newspaper, so they'd buy my gas so I could get there. So I was racing and working for them at the same time. It was tough. It was 6 guys in a room and sharing a bologna sandwich, running out of diesel fuel on the interstate, coming into San Antonio. It was tough, but when you got to the racetrack, it was Don Perdome and Shirley Muldowney and Big Daddy Don Gartledge, Tom the Mongoose McEwen. You got to be a part of that fever, that giant circus, as we call it, you know. Unbelievable days. If I had to do it at my age now, not a chance.
It would be an enormous task indeed to compile a working list of the most memorable races, runs, and remarks that have become the life and lore of John Force. His legendary battles with Al Hoffman, Cruz Pedregon, and even funny car newcomers Scotty Cannon and Frank Pedregon have left a lasting mark on drag racing and have given fans around the world some of the most spectacular racing ever seen. In both victory and defeat, there has always been one constant: the ever unpredictable John Force top-end interview, which many times has been in desperate need of an interpreter.
And change lanes, and I say, God, this ain't time for this. And then Bernie's yelling, no, back in the other lane, because the starting line was edgy. We were afraid of it. And then Coyle says, back to the other lane. And man, I just thought, oh man, don't do this on the last deal or I'm out of steam. And I got a people, Castro, just the people that put in the money. And Jack Nazareth Ford says, what's a John Force? He don't even know. The new president said, Tasca said he's going to win an 8th. And my God, I'm going to have a heart attack before I get to it. Then I got a race junior next door. He's right out the window. And he starts smoking the tires. I didn't really know. I was calling on Bernie. I said, God damn, get that radio working so I can hear you. But I seen the fingers from the boys, but it's close. He was right out the door. I drove her till her neck hung out, boy, right in the last light. 500 feet, she's hunting. He's out the window. 800 feet, that son of a gun's out the window. She trucked right into the light. I didn't know who won. I was yelling at Bernie, talk to me. They wouldn't tell me. About 1,000 foot, she started nosing over. I thought, what a hunk. It ain't going to happen. Coyle said, too much humidity, won't run. Forget it and settle. We did it. That's all that matters. We're late, but we did it. We backed it up. I wanted that 8 deal. I said, Coyle, don't go record and lose it. Where am I going with this interview? I don't even care.
There is a serious side to the John Force legacy, as his Castrol racing team has become a multi-million-dollar corporate entity, headquartered at his fabulous shop and office facility in Yorba Linda, California. In 1997, John added a second funny car to his team, driven by Cruz Pedregon's younger brother Tony, who proceeded to finish second in Winston points to his boss, who had wrapped up his 7th Winston title that year. But 1996 may be the season most indicative of the strength of John Force's operation, including tuners Austin Coyle, Bernie Federley, and John Medler, as Force won the championship, set new single-season records for national event wins, 13, final round appearances, 16, and round wins, 65. Force would be named Driver of the Year by the Motorsports Media, the first time in history a drag racer had won that prestigious award. He's witty, sometimes incoherent, and occasionally mischievous. But where it really counts, John Force is a true champion and deserves the endless accolades and superlatives that continue to come his way. He has helped to put modern-era drag racing on the map, and his fame is known to almost as many non-followers of the sport as those who have zealously enjoyed drag racing all their lives. From the humble roots of a working-class family to international stardom as a drag racing icon, John Force is above anything else one of a kind.
What I really do next to signing autographs with these fans, driving my hot rod is what I love to do. That's what I wake up for. And when I'm really stressed, where a lot of guys get in a car and they're worried about being on fire if they're going to qualify, when I get in my car, that's what I love to do. And the wild ones out here.
History. It's why this building exists and why the stories we shared with you today matter so much to us. There's a lot to reflect on in drag racing's first 5 decades, but the truth is, history is being made right now. It's an inexhaustible resource that places great value and importance on the deeds and accomplishments of the men and women who race and win in drag racing. What kind of history awaits us at the top end of the next millennium? We can only guess. That's about all the time we have for on this special program devoted to drag racing's greatest stories. I'm Bill Stevens, and we'll see you in the next millennium. Thanks for watching.
Wanted more action? You've got more action. We have the thrills, chills, and spills from the greatest moments of your favorite motorsports. Log on to our website, www.diamondpsports.com, and get Diamond P's double volume recap of NHRA's final season of the decade, Drag Racing 99. Watch the video records of arguably the most exciting Top Fuel duel ever. John Force takes his 9th championship. Warren Johnson dominates Pro Stock again to gain his 5th title. And don't miss the down-to-the-wire battle in Pro Stock Bike, not to mention Federal Mogul and Pro Stock Truck. Witness the extraordinary milestones and innovations that have made NHRA Championship drag racing what it is today. See rare footage of legendary drivers and awesome machines challenging the laws of speed and time. NHRA's Racing 2000 is a must-have for the quick and fast fanatics. Log on to our exciting website, www.diamondpsports.com, or call 1-800-421-0725 to order today. Turn your computer screen into a quarter-mile strip with this realistic NHRA drag racing CD-ROM game featuring in-car camera views, instant replay, and commentaries by the pros. Can you qualify and beat the NHRA's best? Test your racing skills on the oval with a virtual face-off car racing game. You can feel the rumble strips in the virtual wheel and hear the roar of the engine. Comes with a connection cable, so you can play against your friends as well, batteries included. Now, 2 easy ways to order. Visit our website at www.diamondpsports.com or call 1-800-421-0725. Immerse yourself with the awesome power of the 1998 U.S. Nationals with Surrounded by Horsepower, the CD that lets you hear drag racing the way it's meant to be heard. Up close and personal. We're strapping you in the car and sending you thundering down the track. Recorded digitally in Dolby Surround Sound, this Century Racing experience is a perfect companion to Thunder at the U.S. Nationals, which features the incredible sights and sounds of NHRA Championship drag racing at its best. Also recorded digitally in Dolby Surround Sound, we're turning your chair into a cockpit and surrounding you with action and excitement that is the U.S. Nationals.